Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, Nordregio webinar on cross-border traffic flows in the Nordic region. My name is Ryan Weber. I'm the Senior Research Advisor here at Nordregio, and as well the Secretariat for one of our three thematic groups that we run here at Nordregio. This event is being organized around our work to develop a three-year, three-phase project called Tri-Border. And this aims to analyze the challenges and opportunities related to developing and planning cross-border transport connections throughout the Nordic region. This project has been funded by the Thematic Group for Sustainable Cities and Urban Development, and it's one of three thematic groups that we have that have been formed under the Nordic Committee of Senior Officials for Regional Policy. The group is comprised of representatives from national ministries, national authorities, regional authorities, and cross-border cooperation committees. And since this is a cross-border, specifically a cross-border project, we thought it would be best to give the opening word to today's webinar to Alf Johansson to say a few words about the roles and activities of the cross-border committees. Alf is the Secretary General of the Värmland-Østfold Cross-Border Council. He is also the leader of several European projects about spatial planning and regional development, including high-speed railway studies for central Scandinavia. So welcome, Alf, if you could say a few opening words about your work with cross-border councils in the Nordic perspective.
Yes, thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Nordregio, for organizing this seminar. I am happy that we can focus on these pilot cases that has been developed during the cooperation between the thematic group and Nordregio and the cross-border, three of the cross-border committees. It's the committee which I am related to, that is the Värmland-Østfold cross-border committee, which is located east of Oslo. And there is the Kvarken cooperation between Vasa and Umeå and the area up there. And then we have the Greater Copenhagen cooperation, which is the Öresund region and Halland also included. We are happy that Nordregio has undertaken three case studies, and I just look forward to see the presentations. We have focused on three a little bit different cases, and I will not in particular go into any of it because the time is too short. So I will actually just leave the floor back to Nordregio and wish you good luck with the conference. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alf. Alf introduced the three main activities that we have developed as part of the Tri-Border project. So since we only have an hour today, I think it's best that we not waste any time and we can get right into the presentation of these three case studies. We will begin with my colleague Julian, if you can join me up here. Just one thing to point out, you'll see on the bottom of your screens the option for a Q&A button. Please, we welcome you to use that form or that medium to interact with us and pose any questions or comments or feedback that you have to any of the next three presentations that you hear. And then once those presentations are over, we will have the opportunity to address the questions and comments that you have. So please don't hesitate to use the question and answer button. Julian, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. Share the screen. All right, good morning, everyone. So I have the pleasure now to have a couple of minutes to present you some of the findings of the first activity of the Tri-Border project. And this one focuses on on a cross-border perspective along the Oslo-Stockholm corridor, and more specifically on the Østfold and Värmland region. Within that project, our aim was to highlight what kind of benefits small and medium-sized cities located in this cross-border region can maybe benefit from such improvement of rail accessibility. And also we have a specific focus on urban developments in those cities. And so today I will not present you all the findings, but I will just scratch a bit the surface and also come up with a couple of reflections on cross-border traffic flows in that specific context. So first of all, what is Värmland-Østfold? It's a cross-border region between Sweden and Norway. You have Värmland, that is quite a large area with mostly with rural characteristics, and you have Karlstad located in most southern part of it, which is the main hub of that region. And on the other side of the border, you have Østfold, which is more of an intermediate kind of region, located quite close to Oslo and its capital labor market area. And here you can see also on the map the different lines with different colors, and the black lines are the existing rail connections going between Oslo and Stockholm. And you can also see two different colors. One is in yellow, and this corresponds to an alternative called 255 that has the idea of having a better train service between Stockholm and Oslo, and you can see which station they plan to have. And you can also see a green line, and this is a corridor that we call Tentacle Corridor, that has a slightly different route and also different numbers of stations along the way. For instance, if you focus on Østfold Värmland, you can see that the scenario in yellow has two stops, namely Karlstad and Arvika within that cross-border region. And if you look at the Tentacle project, you have 4 stops in total, going from Kristinehamn to the east of the cross-border region all the way to Askim in Østfold. So this is just some background elements. And next, when we studied that, we also wanted to see what kind of expectation can SMS, small and medium-sized cities, have when having improvement of rail traffic. And for this, we looked at different contexts in different parts of Europe and beyond. And this table summarizes what are the main rationales for having a high-speed train network in different national contexts. And yeah, here it's in Swedish, but for instance, you can see on the first line, it says hastighet, meaning the speed. It's one of the main rationale, of course, to have a high-speed train service. But then you have different rationales that are not shared with all countries. And for instance, if you look at Sweden, which is the last one in the list, you can see, for instance, milieu, which means environment, and also the last one, political integration. So those are two explicit rationales in the Swedish context that contributes to developing high-speed train in that context, which is then quite different from, for instance, the UK, where political integration is not an explicit rationale. Another findings that we had is also looking at a more local scale and what kind of urban developments can be seen as potential. And for instance, here we selected Karlstad, which is the main urban node in Värmland. And we can see in the middle of the picture is the train station, which is centrally located. And there's actually ongoing work to improve the capacity of the station. And that should be done by 2025. It's not directly linked to the high-speed train or the faster train connection, but you can see there are planning ideas on how to restructure the surroundings of the station. And looking closer at it, it's mostly about housing and business purpose. And housing can be seen in relation to the rail service improvement. For instance, with one of the two scenarios, Karlstad will be only 45 minutes by train to Oslo, which then show that there might be a need to have good housing opportunities for out commuters from Karlstad to Oslo. So that's one example. We had another example that is here also on the slide about Kristinehamn. And this is a so-called small size city, which is quite at the eastern end of Østfold-Värmland cross-border region. And you can see where Kristinehamn name is written on the map. That's basically the city center. But if you look a bit further to the right, there's a small zone in brown-red where it says V9 and there's a small logo with a bus/train, and that's where in their current plan they are thinking to build a new train station. So in opposition to Karlstad, that is a centrally located station, Kristinehamn are prioritized to have a more peripherally located train station. And there's also a link to the fact that they maybe want to increase their chance to have actually a train stopping there, because then it will not reduce the total travel time between other cities. So those are just two examples. And now based on this analysis on Värmland-Østfold, we've discussed what might be the opportunities or challenges when it comes to cross-border flows. And looking at the current situation, we can see one of the opportunities to have a good high-speed train connection is the existence of a cross-border cooperation. There's a lot of dialogue going on between actors at mostly municipal and regional level, and they've been doing a lot of pre-studies to get their case through. We can also see there's a couple of existing cross-border flows. It's currently mostly from Norway to Sweden for different reasons, for like shopping reasons, for entertainment, also as well as second homes. With an improved rail service, we can see that one of the opportunities is the fact that Sweden sees regional development as one rationale to have a high-speed train service, giving a higher chance to have stops in the cross-border context of Värmland-Østfold. And the last one that I just want to briefly mention is the integration in a larger labor market, because at the moment, especially Värmland in the Swedish context, is quite peripheral. It takes quite a while to go either to Stockholm, but also to go to Oslo, and having such a improvement of accessibility will allow not only Karlstad, but also other cities to be integrated in a larger labor market. That's also, for instance, the case with Askim in Østfold, which is currently just below an hour to Oslo, but with the tentacle example, it will be around, I think, 25 minutes. I don't remember the exact number, but in this idea. And then when it comes to obstacles, just quickly, we see two main obstacles in the current situation. One is that the cross-border region has actually quite low population densities, and we have higher densities, but only in a small parts of especially in Värmland, that's basically limited to Karlstad and a couple of smaller cities along the existing corridor. And also the fact that there's several initiatives ongoing, and this might reduce the weight of a wider proposal for having maybe only having one strong initiative rather than two might be one obstacles that we could highlight. And looking at potential with the future improved rail service, we can also see that a couple of destinations are not along that high-speed train corridor, and also, for instance, cross-border flows from Norway to Sweden actually just stop by the border to do some shopping or some leisure activities, and there is no like stop along the exact border. And also a lot of Norwegians are going to the more rural parts of the Värmland-Østfold region for second homes. And the last one I just want to quickly mention is, so this goes in a general context of having a rail service as an alternative to flying. And this might be contradictory because in that sense, one of the main idea will be that to reduce the travel time between Oslo and Stockholm as much as possible to be competitive and a real alternative to flying. So there might be some maybe conflict when having a lot of stops along the way. But this is just some ideas that we thought would be good just to point at this stage.
Thank you,
very
Julian.
much.
So I will now present the second part of the tree border project, which focuses on the Kvarken region, and more specifically on the ferry link connecting the city of Vasa in Finland and the Swedish city of Umeå. And we have investigated what the importance, what role the ferry link plays for cross-border cooperation and integration in the region, and also looked at what different types of effects the reestablishment of the ferry connection in 2012 has had on the region. And for those of you who are not that familiar with the Kvarken region, it's a region that is a cross-border region that is located along the Gulf of Bothnia, connecting or consisting of the Finnish regions of Ostrobothnia, Central Ostrobothnia and South Ostrobothnia, and the Swedish region of Västerbotten and Örnsköldsvik municipality. And the Kvarken ferry link connects the two main cities in the region, Umeå and Vasa. So this has been the basis of analysis for our study, and we have also looked at these various aspects and also looking forward at what potential there is for stronger cross-border cooperation and integration. So to briefly sum up on the main findings, which we have on the next slide here. So firstly, we can say that reliable transport link is very central for this cross-border cooperation to be able to take place. And it has been vital for maintaining and developing these relations. And we can see, for example, that in the late 1990s, following the entry of Finland and Sweden into the European Union, which resulted in the abolishment of tax-free sales on the ferry, that this led to a significant decline in cross-border traffic, and subsequently also to an unstable ferry connection that operated during the first decade of the 2000s, which was something that really hindered cross-border cooperation and has been described by local and regional actors as really being the low point in cross-border cooperation in this region. And it was increasingly difficult to maintain the different economic, social, and cultural ties that had been established during the previous decades. So based on this background, the various local and regional actors and stakeholders, they decided to take action to re-establish a new ferry connection on an entirely new basis, which means that the cities of Vasa and Umeå, they decided to jointly form a shipping company that would be responsible of operating the ferry. And also, in addition to this, to form a jointly owned port company to support this and also the port logistics involved. So this happened in 2012, and then the current ferry, which is pictured on the image that we see here on the slide, started to operate in 2013. But we have been interested in looking at what types of both direct and indirect effects and spin-offs this ferry has had. So I will just briefly mention a few of the key ones that we have looked at. So as we see here in the image, obviously the number of passengers and also freight traffic has increased quite noticeably during the past decade after the introduction of the new ferry connection. But the importance of the ferry connection goes way beyond the sheer traffic numbers, and we see that cross-border cooperation has again strengthened and taken new forms. And also there are different types of cooperation initiatives and different examples in different domains. For example, the notion of an extended regional labor market is now increasingly central, and really a precondition for there to be a regional labor market is a traffic connection that allows frequent travel. Also within healthcare, we see new types of cooperation agreements. For example, one where which has now been in place since 2019, where stroke patients are being transported from the Finnish side to the university hospital in Umeå. We also see new types of cooperation initiatives in research and education. And this is a region that has quite many universities and also 55,000 students, which is a rather high number in a region of this type, and different types of joint courses and projects are being organized. And also it could be worth mentioning, which is also, you saw on the first slide, the cover page of the report, which pictures the UNESCO World Heritage Site consisting of the high coast on the Swedish side of the Kvarken region and the Kvarken archipelago on the Finnish side. So this is a jointly managed cross-border World Heritage Site, which is important. So there are various synergies being established here. And also looking at businesses, many companies in the region are export oriented. So for them, the importance of the ferry is high in terms of freight transportation, but also in establishing different types of synergies in different ways. So then on the next slide, we will see some of the opportunities that we have encountered. So as mentioned, there is now a multitude of different types of cooperation initiatives, and there is an increasing belief now of the potential benefits and synergies that can be established by working together. And for example, the examples that we see in healthcare, research and education and so forth, they are largely based on the idea that, or the need to maintain specialized services and a skilled and competent labor force. And also we have looked at how this cross-border cooperation has evolved over time, over the decades, and we see that now the territorial scope has expanded. So there are more actors and different types of stakeholder groups involved. And also in a geographical context, that the ferry does not only serve the immediate region, but now increasingly when looking into the future, that regional stakeholders see more potential of the ferry connection in connection to surrounding transport infrastructure, and also how this could open up potential for trade between European, Russian, and Chinese markets. So these are just to name a few. And then, for example, another one, which the Kvarken Council, which is the main driver of this cross-border cooperation, you can say, and has been so since the 1970s. This year became a EGTC, which is a European grouping for territorial cooperation. And what this will imply in practice remains to be seen, but at least there is a high level of optimism that this will provide new possibilities, and also in terms of funding and enable potential to strengthen this cooperation. And then perhaps also we see pictured on the image on the slide here the new ferry, which will start operating next year. So this is also something that is seen as something that will then enable the strengthening of this cooperation to a further level. But in addition to these opportunities, some of the obstacles that we encountered are also worth emphasizing. For example, the notion that national level decision-making does not always support cross-border cooperation at the regional level. One concrete example is, for example, when the regional actors wanted to or decided to establish a jointly owned port company. This was initially not supported by the national levels, but they managed to implement this anyhow. There have also been some challenges regarding funding of the new ferry, which will start operating next year. So the Finnish government has committed to funding a portion of the purchase, whereas Sweden has not, because there's a Swedish state principle that disallows funding cross-border traffic, cross-border ferry traffic. And also, while I mentioned that there is an increasing degree of cooperation between universities, that there are still different types of structural barriers that hinder this cooperation, such as different national educational policies and different funding models. And then lastly, I could mention also that in light of the current COVID-19 pandemic, that this study was largely conducted before that. And the effects remain to be seen. At least currently, this has of course hindered this cooperation to a high degree, but based on the notion that there are a lot of indications that this cross-border cooperation is now being on a more solid basis than what it was before, that the potential for recovery would seem to be rather good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mats. And then I'll go straight on to the third and last part of the Tri-Border project. Good morning, everyone. By the way, I'm Diana Wynn, and I'm a junior research fellow, and together with Julien, who presented earlier, and my colleague Johannes Lidmo, we focused on transit-oriented development in the greater Copenhagen region, which draw some parallel to the first policy brief produced in this project, but here we focused on how the development of station areas and understanding kind of the dynamics around those developments contribute to a greater integrated region. As most of you perhaps know, the greater Copenhagen region constitutes the largest economic area in the Nordic countries. And it has the largest cross-border commuting in the region. So it is an economic powerhouse without doubt, and it's been interesting to understand the dynamics of what that means at the regional level once you move out from the capital region of Copenhagen, but also beyond Malmö. So in our study, we chose to look at 4 case studies that was not meant to be an exhaustive representation of the whole GCR, but kind of to represent kind of the different geographies and the development and regional development outlooks on the Danish side and the Swedish side. So we chose 2 in Denmark and 2 in Sweden, and they were based on the criteria that each only had 1 hour commuting time to each respective city on each side of the border. And the case studies was conducted in the spring based on interviews with local planners as well as desk research. We were limited by the situation, the pandemic, of course, with borders shutting down, although that didn't directly impact our study as such. We did take some of these aspects into consideration in our report, but I won't go into detail here. So what guided our study was how can an enhanced understanding of transit-oriented development characteristics and mobility planning in small and medium-sized cities contribute to a more integrated Copenhagen region? And then sort of supporting that question is looking the ways in which the local design and development of railway station support these integration efforts and TOD characteristics somehow. And our findings show that in the greater Copenhagen overall, benefits from well-developed rail structure, but at the same time, due to its geography and the distribution of people and jobs across the region, only or about a third people cannot feasibly access the main urban areas by train on a daily basis. So this means that although the 4 small and medium-sized cities are well integrated within their sub-regional context, the cross-border integration was limited. And this wasn't too surprising. I won't have the time to kind of discuss in detail each case here, but in Sweden, we looked at Höör and Landskrona, a small and a medium-sized city. Likewise, in Denmark, we chose Lejre, a fairly green and rural municipality, and then Ringsted, that historically has been a transit node, not just in the Nordic, but also like in a pan-European perspective. And yeah, so they had a very clear connection with their immediate sort of large city context, but played a more important role sort of within their borders than in a cross-border context. I think that can be emphasized. In identifying the opportunities from our studies, like I guess we were trying to kind of answering here, like why do people cross the border? And why do they not cross the border? And what elements can ease or increase the cross-border flow to sort of enhance the cross-border cooperation? And it is evident that people cross the border, at least from the Swedish side, because they come to work. And there also a substantial amount of kind of cross-border crossing for leisure purposes. And so given that, we see that there, you know, like the characteristics of these small and medium-sized cities needs to be understood kind of a bit differently in the way that they interact with their immediate large cities, and their relationship to kind of the region on the other side of the border, and that because our study was based on some of the objectives and goals in the traffic charter. We also identify an opportunity here to kind of perhaps choose specific case studies, or try to look at the nature of smaller municipalities when setting new objectives or revising certain mobility or transportation goals. And then lastly, what I mentioned earlier about that there's like from our study, there seemed to be uneven kind of flow of commuting from one side or the other. And I think it will be interesting to kind of look more closely into the role this plays in the objectives of regional integration, and how that impacts the kind of sense of belonging or connection that the municipalities have within the region overall. And so this is like some snapshots from where from in the study, but a lot more information is in the final report. So hopefully you will all have a chance to look at that. So without much further ado, I'll wrap up the part 3 presentation, and I think my colleagues will join me here.
Thank you very much, Diana and Julian. Natalia, we had a question that popped in. Can you show us the question again? The greater, Stian Hansen says, Greater Copenhagen, your cases are far from the centers. If we assume that 1 hour travel implies very little commuting rate per resident, what did we learn in the third phase on the Greater Copenhagen region in terms of the transport flows, the commuting flows from the 2 Danish cases to, say, Copenhagen and Malmö? Were we able to split it between and understand what the flows were from those 2 municipalities?
I mean, it was evident that these municipalities saw themselves as a very integrated part of the capital region, but not so much extended to the Malmö side. There were some connection there, but this is where the kind of cross-border identity could be strengthened in documents such as the traffic charter. And their motivation to develop the train station had multifunctional roles, both at the local and regional level, but then regional level was at the subnational level and not at the cross-border level.
So basically things like the traffic charter could be these ways of strengthening the brand of the region, no, not just the brand of the region, but the strategic perspective of transportation throughout the region.
Yeah, because they do see them part of this Greater Copenhagen region, but it's not always for granted that this means kind of a cross-border outlook in their development when they develop their train station or plan for mobility in their local communities. They're invested in kind of providing a development that's good for the municipal long-term development.
Great. I think this strategic perspective, when talking about cross-border projects and on a larger scale, a cross-border perspective to transport and mobility, is something that we're going to come back to in a few moments in the discussion session. So Mats out there in the interworld, and Julian and Diana, thanks very much for these overviews of the work in the Tri-Border project. So these 3 phases of the project have been developed, and now we're preparing a synthesis publication. And just to give a brief introduction to what that synthesis is all about, I'd like to introduce my colleague Lucian Aguirre-Borges to say a few words about the synthesis work that's ongoing. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Thanks. It's good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I will be quite brief and try to summarize a bit what we heard, from our colleagues. So what we can see is that, these 3 presentations, they illustrate the potential challenges of planning and development across national borders in the Nordic context. So we saw that they deal with cross-border transport infrastructures that link cities that they have different functions in their countries. Julian has told us a little bit about the potential effects on small and medium-sized cities of the high-speed train connection linking 2 Nordic capitals, Oslo and Stockholm. Mats presented the importance of the Kvarken ferry link to offer and maintain service to 2 cities that they are regional centers in their countries, Umeå and Vasa. And Diana told us about the challenges and opportunities that some small and medium-sized cities in Sweden and Denmark face with their connectivity in the regional railway system that connects the capital city of Copenhagen to a regional center in Sweden, in Malmö. In all these cases, they have quite different territorial preconditions. So small and medium-sized cities, they will acquire different functions with their engagement in regional infrastructure networks. So there is a need for local planners to understand which roles the cities they might have when in these larger functional regions, and be prepared to employ strategies to balance the inflows and outflows of commuters, for example, that to avoid that a city becomes just a dormitory city. So this, as Ryan said, like these studies, they are discussed together in a coming report that will be released by the end of this month at the latest. And they are also like a kind of a basis to initiate the discussion with experts from national transport authorities and explore like the challenge that they face, like when cooperating cross-border transport infrastructure. So that's, we will hear now the perspectives of 3 experts from national transport agencies, like from Denmark, Finland and Sweden. And back to you, Ryan.
Thank you very much. So I would like to welcome Thomas Sick-Nielsen to the conversation, Björn Hasselgren and Marco Mempa to the discussion. Thomas is a senior consultant at the Danish Road Directorate. He has also been a senior researcher at the University of Copenhagen and the Technical University of Denmark. His current work includes strategic analysis on the Helsingør-Helsingborg link between Denmark and Stockholm. Björn Hasselgren is a senior advisor at the Swedish Transport Administration. He has been a researcher in areas of transportation and regional planning from KTH and is currently a guest researcher at Uppsala University. And Marco Mempa is a transport system specialist from the Finnish transport and communication agency Traficom. He participates in the development of transport systems at a variety of governing levels with maybe a specific emphasis on freight transport. He's worked as a consultant for over 18 years, where he has participated in many cross-border projects in the Nordic region. So welcome, gentlemen, to the discussion today. I think each of you brings this unique cross-border perspective to the discussion. Maybe, Thomas, I can begin with you. Can you just say a few words about, say, from your national perspective, working at the Danish Road Directorate, how you typically work in your everyday lives with cross-border projects, maybe specifically in a Nordic context, but also perhaps in a European context? What forms of strategic perspectives does that include, and dialogues with other actors?
Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay, good. It's the iPad. Yeah, how do we work with it? I mean, you can say, if I take the perspective of the National Transport Authority, so the main thing that we do is to facilitate people fulfilling that everyday transport need and facilitating Danish businesses fulfilling their transport needs, maintaining competitiveness and so forth. So there's, of course, a demand focus and also generally a national focus, right? So focusing on cross-border links has to more or less come from that, you would say, need to travel. And I mean, I noted also before, for instance, the report on the Kraken ferry link from between Finland and Sweden, and I noted, for instance, on that the growth in cargo on the ferry, which was a rather low growth rate, right? I'm quite sure that if you look at the growth rates in demand within Sweden and within Finland, they are going to be a lot higher than the growth rate that applies to the Kraken ferry link. So often national links will get more attention than cross-border links from that perspective. But of course, due to needs to facilitate transport with goods and leisure and so forth to other countries, there's some attention, of course, also towards the cross-border links. But from the demand perspective, you often end up with more emphasis and also a lot more knowledge on the demand dynamics that apply nationally. Mm-hmm. I noted also from these presentations that I heard that you usually have special conditions, right, in the cross-border region. So if you think about the significance of tax-free trade for the demand for the Kraken ferry link, the surprising maybe low integration from municipalities to the east of Malmö towards Copenhagen. So other rules apply, and we're not very good at I think understanding and predicting them. So it's a little bit also outside our main competencies and planning regime. Right.
So would you say from a Danish perspective, when going through the development of the Greater Copenhagen region, and obviously the fixed link is the main component of that, was that dealt with on quite a strategic level within the Danish national perspective, or was that more of a project-based work that was carried out within the Greater Copenhagen region? Like, what sort of priority level would you say that link had taken during its development from a national perspective?
Sorry, which link? I didn't hear that.
The Greater Copenhagen link, the Øresund Bridge.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very long process dating back to the 1970s, actually, right? Often dealt with in specific committees, ad hoc organizations, I think. It's very hard to compare that process with how we specifically do things today, I'd say, right? But this is often dealt with, more or less at the government level, in specific organizations, producing specific elaborations on the possibilities towards this cross-border link, rather than an everyday planning organization task.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't the best formulated question, but the point being that you inevitably end up dealing with these more complex structure of actors and network of actors and people with a say in the process, and that can create some significant obstacles to implementing these projects, no doubt. Marco, in a Finnish perspective, as I understand it, you've just recently completed developing a national transport strategy. It would be interesting to know what the situation is with the Finnish national transport strategy and what sorts of priorities it has placed on cross-border linkages within that national strategy.
Well, actually, it's not finished yet. It's still a draft and under process. The plan is to finish it during the next spring. But the draft is there, and for instance, Finland is part of EU, so all the transport policy agreements, Finland is committed to them. So, for instance, 10T network, 10T policy, that's quite important and prioritized in the plan. And if we look up at the main goals of the plan, there's 3 goals. So one of them is accessibility, and let's say one of the sub goals of that is international accessibility. So it's recognized that it's important, and of course Finland, like other Nordic countries, export and import is very, very important for us. So both authorities and also politicians listen very carefully when trade and industry, when they have needs related to cross-border connections. So it's recognized. But the thing is pretty much like Thomas just said, that of course it's easier to look inside the country, and I think that cross-border connections they should have more. You should recognize them more than today. It should be developed, that part.
Björn, when it comes to Sweden, can you just say a few words about how the cross-border perspective is prioritized, and maybe what types of links, the proposed links that are currently being discussed to be implemented, and what those priority levels are from a Swedish perspective?
Yeah, first, thanks for the presentation. I think they were quite interesting, and that this project is really important. We have to learn more about how these cross-border infrastructure systems work and how we can analyze them and understand them in an evaluation, development and perspective. From the Swedish point of view, I would say that over time, cross-border perspectives, cross-border projects have grown in importance in the transport administration over the last 10 to 15 years. So from being something discussed as a side effect or of transport planning, I think they have become more integrated into what we are doing in the daily work. And I would say that all these three examples that were presented earlier are part of our discussions to different extent. We are mainly responsible for roads and railroads, so not too much in the maritime sector, but there are connections, of course, to harbors and so on. So one thing that you can see when you study these kind of cross-border projects is that they are often directed in an east-west direction in the Nordic sphere compared to the more traditional national transport planning, which has had more of a north-south perspective, I would say. A bit different in the different countries, but it might depend on how our countries are formed geographically. So this is something new and important, I think, because it changes the basic strategy and directions in the transport flows and transport planning in general. An important aspect when working with these cross-border projects is that it's funny how different we view transport infrastructure investments and how different we analyze them in countries so close to each other. For example, Thomas and I, we are striving right now with the HH connection, and it's funny to see how you can start from a common idea and then end up in quite small but significant differences in for example, when you make an Excel sheet on something.
Like this is maybe actually coming towards my next question. Just wondering, like, are you talking about, say, the transport modeling the impacts of commuter flows and transport flows and this types of thing? What is the nature of information sharing that goes on between the Nordic countries when it comes to evidence-based planning in a variety of different forms?
Thomas, you can start. What's your view, Thomas?
But there's a long tradition, right? So there's a long tradition with the NVF, Nordic Vejteknisk Forbund, where a lot of methodologies and informations have been shared, obviously, and so there's been a lengthy dialogue, but there are also differences in the tradition, how you measure things, what you measure specifically, valuation of travel time, you name it, right? So a lot of national specifics still. And of course, it has to do with also that these methodologies develop within the countries in a dialogue with national stakeholders. They don't develop in detail across borders, it seems, right? So that's what we have learned, Björn, I think. So we have developed from other sources, right? Even though there is a lot of coordination and dialogue, a lot of things in transport are really global, right? So they come from source books that are used all over the world, but not everything. and when you are at the end of the line and have to put things together, you see these things that don't match up very clearly. So there's still some distance across the border, right? And I think we collaborate not fluently, but on a needs base, on an ad hoc basis, right? So when we are doing this HH assessment, so we collaborate on that, and then of course everything is disclosed, right, in detail.
The Nordic region has the common vision to be the most sustainable and integrated region in the world. And it obviously goes without saying that transport and mobility are extremely cross-cutting issues when it comes to the perspective of being not only the most integrated region in the world, of course, but also the most sustainable. We know that some of the biggest challenges we face in terms of achieving carbon neutrality exist in the transport sector. But if you were sitting at a table, at a Nordic table, discussing what can we do more from a Nordic perspective to facilitate this integration, this keeps in mind that the vision and its associated action plan, it includes the priorities for the green transition of the transport sector, including a research program on fossil-free transport, strengthening cooperation between relevant ministries, and developing knowledge on physical planning, including infrastructure and transport systems. So what within those general perspectives would you see as a priority for Nordic collaboration as an entity to focus on to help support achieving that vision of a more integrated Nordic region? And Marco, maybe do you have any first ideas on this? I'm maybe struck by one thing, this reoccurring term of this ad hoc collaboration when it comes to individual projects. And I'm just wondering is there anything that could be developed from a more strategic Nordic perspective in terms of a vision for transport infrastructure moving forward in the future? Do you have any ideas on this?
If I understood right the question, so I think I don't know if I can prioritize any of those, all very important, but I think maybe if you think about the strategic level, the challenge is that all the countries have their own transport system plans, or something like that. So we don't have any joint kind of Nordic countries strategy. So if we really would like to cooperate very closely and see the big picture and see the whole Nordic countries as a whole, so we would need some kind of joint strategy, I think. And then we would also need some political intention, and that means money. When we think about real concrete measures, so we would need some kind of joint budget, I think. That might be some kind of start for that.
Thomas or Bjorn, what do you think on this general issue of how we could tackle this by providing knowledge and information from a Nordic perspective to facilitate higher integration? I don't know if a full legitimate Nordic strategy is necessarily realistic within the current landscape, but are there things that you think we can develop from a more strategic perspective to help guide our path towards more integrated region from a transport perspective?
I can start. Yeah, I think you could do more. Perhaps try to develop these kind of analytical structures or models that we could use in common. Perhaps there was a question from Sten Hansen there on goods transports, and that might be one good idea, I think, to do something. But I think you also have to lift the perspectives. It's not just about transportation and infrastructure planning. When you look into the general organizational forms for cooperation between the Nordic countries, you have a number of these different structures in different fields. You could take even the air market with the Scandinavian SAS flight company. That's one example. Good in some ways, less good in other ways. You have the postal offices integrated. You have a lot of corporations working between the countries. And I think you should really look into these different kinds of cooperative structures and ask yourself what kind of structure would be the best in this specific case. And so I think it's a really difficult task, and it deserves some thinking.
Thomas, anything to add on this point?
Yeah, I think maybe it's another way to look at it, but I think maybe we should do more research in cross-border flows, right? And cross-border interactions and how they develop. Because I think we can only prioritize higher integration if we know the value of it. And we cannot integrate just to integrate, or I mean, it means investing in something which where it can be more uncertain, right? And I think also, I mean, so these oddities that apply to the, for instance, the Kvarken ferry, the tax-free, and what we have seen on Øresund, that you have an increase in commuting and then it retracts a bit, right? And you have also maybe had a net export of 10,000 residents from the greater Copenhagen area to Sweden, but then it sort of stopped. Why did it do that? What stops these things? Where will it go in the future? That's pretty important to be able to prioritize increasing integration, I would say. Yeah, another perspective. Right?
I like the comment that you made there, that we can only prioritize if we know the true value of it. And I think that that's somewhat of a message that we can take home with us from looking at things from both a more evidence-based and a strategic perspective to get this further understanding of not only what the flows are, indeed that is important, but what is the value and the impact of those flows from a societal and economic perspective. I think these two avenues, or these three avenues, in fact, are important comments that you've made today. And I think they can help guide us as we go forward with our future research agendas from a Nordic perspective. So it is now 11 o'clock, and we have asked you all to be here for an hour. So I would like to thank each of you, Marco, Thomas, and Bjorn, for your participation in this discussion. I know that there were a few questions and comments that were posed in the comments and question and answer field, but we will be sure to get back to you with answers to these questions if we have not indeed answered them during the conversations today. So I would like to thank everybody for participation today, especially to you as discussants, you three as discussants, and also to my colleagues for giving the nice presentations earlier. And just to let you know that we have very recently, I believe yesterday, published the final report for the phase 3 project of the analysis and research for the greater Copenhagen region. So you can find that on our website, as well as the previous report for phase 2, the Kvarken link, and of course the policy brief for phase 1, looking at the train connection between Stockholm and Oslo. And in the next few weeks, we will have 2 to 3 weeks, we will have posted and published the synthesis report to the Tri-Border project. So I also encourage you to follow Nordregio on social media or check in on our website in a few weeks to get that final information. So thanks a lot for being here today, and I wish you a great rest of the day.